Hey everybody, welcome to Dive Deeper.
A couple announcements first of all. Remember that if you're interested in coming to Title Impact this summer, forms are due the first week of March. You can either bring them to Rally Night or the first Sunday if you come to Middleton Baptist.
Also, if you're a part of Middleton Baptist, this Sunday is our annual meeting. So if you don't know what that is, it's a meeting where the church gets together to pray and to ask the Holy Spirit to help us together to make really important decisions for how our church will move forward together in the next year. So even though parts of those meetings can be pretty boring, right?
It's true.
So where they say, can someone make a motion of such and such and seconded, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carried, right? Like parts of the meeting can be boring, but as a whole, it's actually a really huge, important part of our life together as a church.
Right, totally. So if you're a part of our church, you should come. We believe that the Holy Spirit guides us as a church to make these major decisions, and He speaks through everyone. You guys don't have a junior Holy Spirit, as if you aren't full members of the church. If you're a Christian, you have the same Holy Spirit as all the adults in this church.
Right. So this meeting is a time where we seek the Holy Spirit together as a church. Now, you can only actually vote if you're a member of the church, and the reason for that is that membership is the process by which we try to evaluate, as much as we can, whether someone is really a Christian or not. So what it means to be a member of our church is that you're genuinely a member of Jesus's body, meaning that you're following Jesus, and baptism, right, is the symbol of that. It's the initiation ritual that symbolizes how you've been united to Jesus in His death and resurrection. So to be a member, you need to be a follower of Jesus, as symbolized in your baptism. And in addition to that, to be a member of like our church specifically, as opposed to any of the other good churches around, you have to commit to this local church to say like, yeah, this is my church family and I want to be a part of it. I want to serve here and help the other members grow as Christians. And I invite them to help me grow by calling me out when it's necessary. So that's the gist of what membership is about.
Right, so only members can vote at the church meeting that's coming up. But even if you're not a member, but if you do consider yourself a part of our church, we'd encourage you to come to the meeting to hear how we go about making these decisions together. And you are allowed to speak and share your thoughts into the meeting. So we'd love to have your perspective as young people trying to follow Jesus as we make these decisions.
Yeah. Okay, so that's our little plug for why you should come to the annual meeting this Sunday after church. Also, don't forget that it's Rally Night next week, so bring a friend.
All right, that's all for announcements, and here's our warm-up question this week. Tell your group one of your fondest memories of a snow day as a kid.
Okay, so one of the big themes in Acts 14 is persecution.
Right. If you don't know what the word persecution means, it's when other people treat you badly because of what you believe or how you live. And usually it's used in the context of religious persecution. It often has to do with suffering literal physical harm, but people can also be persecuted by being bullied, suffering verbal abuse, or in some countries, people might lose their job for being a Christian or other things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So in this chapter, Paul and Barnabas, they heal a guy who couldn't walk. And then the crowds think that they're Greek gods who have come to earth as people because of this miracle, right? But Paul tells them like, no, like we're just humans. But the crowd is a little crazy, but they do listen in the end.
Then it says that some of the Jewish people from the previous towns Paul had preached at, these are the Jewish people who didn't believe Jesus was their Messiah. They come and stir up the crowds and they stone Paul.
And just to be clear, getting stoned here doesn't mean smoking pot. It means a group of people pick up rocks and throw them at you until you die. So the crowd thought that Paul was dead, but it turns out he wasn't actually dead.
Okay, so then Paul and Barnabas go back through the previous towns that they had visited, which is super gutsy when you think about it, right? Think about how they had been persecuted in those towns before. They go back through these towns and encourage the believers there, and this is what they say.
So pause here and read Acts 14, 21, and 22.
All right, so what should we get out of this text?
Well, this theme of Christians being persecuted is really common all throughout the New Testament. In their world, Christianity was an illegal religion. The Roman government wanted everyone to worship the Roman gods. And so the earliest Christians faced real physical persecution a lot. And some Christians still do today in countries like China and Iran, where it's illegal to be a Christian.
Right. But that doesn't mean that we don't face a different kind of persecution here in Canada. You know, I've heard some of you who have been ridiculed at school and made fun of or something like that for being a Christian. And even though that's not as bad as being put in prison or being killed, that doesn't mean that your suffering wasn't real suffering.
Yeah. And I think this story and the theme of persecution should prepare us for the reality that we might have to face suffering in our lives if we really want to follow Jesus. People will make fun of us. People will exclude us. People might misunderstand us, right? Like, I know some of you have said that people hear that you're a Christian and they're like, oh, so you must hate gay people, right? And like, people misunderstand you and make hurtful assumptions about you. And in a way, that's a form of persecution.
And to be clear, if you're being mean to queer people, that is not okay, right? Like, if people are mean to you because you're being mean, that's not you being persecuted for being a Christian. That's just you being a jerk. Jesus calls us to love everyone and to treat everyone with love, even if we think that the way they're living is not what's best for them.
So that's one way that you might face a kind of persecution. Or maybe like all your friends want you to go along with something like drinking at a party or vaping in the bathroom at school or something like that. And you might be like, no, like, I'm not gonna do that. And sometimes when you stand up for what's right, it makes people feel offended because they know what they're doing is wrong. And they might be mean to you for that, like starting to exclude you from their friend group or making fun of you or, you know, whatever.
Let's stop there and let's talk about this in our groups. Have you faced persecution for your faith? And if not, what might that look like in the future?
Okay, so another thing I wanted to look at in Acts 14 is that we have another short record of what Paul preached on his journey.
Yeah, so this is just after Paul heals the crippled guy, like we mentioned earlier. Then the crowd thinks that Paul and Barnabas are Zeus and Hermes, Greek gods, and they try to sacrifice a bull to them as an act of worship.
Right, and Paul tries to convince them not to do that, and what he says is really interesting, and I think it can help us think about how we as Christians understand other religions in the world. So one thing Paul says is that God has revealed a little bit of his goodness to all people everywhere by giving them food and joy in life. So every religion has a certain truth about there being a divine being that gives good things. But then Paul also says that worshiping any concept of a God other than Yahweh, the God of Israel, Paul calls that worthless.
So with that in mind, pause now and read Acts 14, verse 15 to 18.
Okay, so I think this is really important for us to think about. How should we view other religions? On one end of the spectrum, some people think that all religions lead to God. All religions are good and true. And then the other end of the spectrum, some people think that there's absolutely nothing good in other religions.
Okay, but it sounds like you're saying that maybe Paul is saying something between these two extremes.
Yeah, so in this passage, Paul seems to be saying that even people of other religions can grasp some bit of truth about God. Paul says that God never left them, the people of other religions, without evidence of himself and his goodness. He gives the example of God sending rain and crops of food and joy in people's hearts. He seems to be saying that these are blessings, good gifts that we experience in normal life that point us to a good God. He's saying all human cultures throughout history have had this sense that there's a divine being who has given them something good. And Paul says that this, as people in the story are trying to offer a bull as a sacrifice to them, thinking that they are gods because they healed a guy.
So then, do you think that Paul's statement about God revealing himself in some way to people of other religions is then connected to them trying to sacrifice a bull?
Yeah, so I think Paul's acknowledging that their desire to present a sacrifice as an act of worship is actually kind of natural and good. That's one thing Paul would affirm about their religion. When you see a good gift in your life, like the healing of a crippled guy, you should see that as a gift from God and offer him worship as a response.
But then, is there anything that Paul doesn't affirm about their religion?
Well, he straight up says that the gods they think they're worshiping are worthless idols.
Right.
Zeus and Hermes are not the true God who deserves worship. They aren't the ones who gave the people these blessings. He's saying the only true God who we should worship is Yahweh, the God of Israel. And Jesus is Yahweh in human form.
Interesting. So you think then that this gives us a helpful framework that we can use to interact with people of other religions?
Yeah, I think so. I think it means that we can talk with people of different religious beliefs, in our school or in our culture, and not say, like, everything you believe is totally wrong. Like, I think of First Nations spirituality, for instance. There are lots of really great teachings in their spiritual beliefs, like about caring for creation and animals and honoring elders in our community. And I believe that those truths come from God, revealing himself and how we should live, even to people who have never heard of Jesus. But if they say we should worship other spiritual beings, such as Glooskap, and to clarify, not all First Nations people do believe that, but some traditionally would have. If they are worshiping any spiritual beings other than Jesus, then we would say that's not good.
Okay, interesting. And there's good things like that in any religion. Like Muslims believe they should give to the poor, and Buddhists believe that they should deny their selfish desires. But even though they have some truth, if they don't worship Jesus as God, we believe at least, that they still need to change what they believe.
Yeah, and we also acknowledge that we as Christians, we don't know everything 100% exactly right about God. Because he's infinite, like no human can ever know God perfectly. But we do believe that Jesus is the truest revelation of who God is and how we should live.
Okay, so let's talk about this in our groups. What are some beliefs from other religions that you can affirm as true? And what are some that you see go against the truth revealed by Jesus?